Hi, I'm Sarah, and you're watching Can Sarah DIY It. Today, I am going to show you how I made two really cool wall art pieces using two-part resin. Two-part resin is a type of resin where you put a resin and a hardener together, equal parts, and it's going to take 12 to 24 hours to harden and sometimes even up to 3 days to harden. The type I'm using did take up to 3 days to harden. I made a couple of different pieces to go with my gallery wall that I created and did a video on last week. When you're working with resin, you sometimes need to wear a mask, you sometimes need to wear gloves, and just make sure that you're following the precautions that are on the bottles of the products that you are using. All right, here we go. Let's get into it. Let's do it. For the mandala molds, there are these lifted areas of the molds that create the grooves in the design of your finished piece. And the first thing I needed to do after I mixed in a little bit of chalk paint, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, was just put a little bit of the resin in and use my silicone spreader to just spread everything out, rub it into each area. And what this is going to do is this is going to help me to avoid getting air bubbles and make sure that I'm getting this resin into each and every little space that there is, because these are very detailed molds. Now I used chalk paint because it was the shade of the color that I really wanted. I know that you can use acrylic paint, but chalk paint, not so much. And I will tell you that they did turn out fine. However, after I poured all of the resin out, there was a little bit of a residue in the bottom of the cup. So I don't believe that chalk paint is ideal, but it definitely worked for this project. I shook the mold a little bit to get any of the air bubbles from the bottom of the mold, and I used my heat gun to burst any of those bubbles on top. And then I let them sit for a couple of days before I removed them from the molds. And when I did remove them from the molds, they were a little bit bendy still. You can see the gorgeous detail in each of these mandalas, but I wanted to use them for wall decor, and I knew that you weren't going to be able to see that detail up close if I was just hanging it on the wall. So I decided to take some silver paint from Plaid, and I used my silicone tool again, and I just rubbed it all over the piece. And I did that with each of the mandalas. I let them sit for a day or so because I really wanted the paint to dry all the way in the cracks before I went in with some alcohol and a Q-tip and some towels and scrubbed all of the excess paint away to reveal the details. And I absolutely love the way they turned out. And to me, they look just absolutely perfect. And they went really nicely on my wall. It was a lot of work to remove the excess paint, but it was absolutely worth it. I think that I might have gone in with a damp cloth after, I don't know, maybe after like 15-20 minutes, just to like remove some of the excess paint before it had all dried, because this did take me a really long time. But you know, the finished product is really beautiful, and so I'm not mad at the fact that it took me a while to get the excess paint off. So for the Stag, I just knew that I wanted it to be gold. So I used my gold pigment powder, and I will link that in my description box. And I used my 2-part resin, and this definitely took 3+ days to cure. I was a little bit nervous about the antlers and making sure that everything was laying level and flat. I do have on my table a silicone mat, and that is for any spillage. It's just gonna, the resin will just pull right off of that really easily. I used a ton of this pigment powder. I just eyeball this type of stuff. I do not use any measurements, but it is gorgeous. I mean, it was glowing golden. So what I did is I poured it in and kept sort of easing it into the antler area. And then as I felt like it was flowing in that area, I kept sort of trying to encourage it into the areas I wanted it to go. But really, I mean, this is the first time I've used this mold, and I know that I'm going to be using it more and more. I have some really fun ideas as far as using some dried flowers and things like that. Definitely people will be getting some gifts with this Stag. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. This was a relatively easy piece to make. It really was more about waiting for it to cure. But yeah, it was really simple to do. I was really nervous about getting in the antlers and making sure that I filled each spot and making sure that there weren't any air pockets, but really it was perfect. I shook it a little bit. I used my heat gun to pop any bubbles, but honestly, when I unmolded it, it was perfect. There were no air bubbles to be found. I didn't even need to top coat it because for me, I'm using it as wall decor. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it inspired you to try something new, dip your toe in the water and try some resin. Definitely, it's a little bit more intimidating than using a UV resin because it's something where you have to let it sit for a while. And my initial spot that I put my resin was not exactly level. So that caused me some issues, but everything turned out okay in the end. And I really enjoyed the finished products, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. So if you're not already subscribed and you'd like to see more of what I have to offer, please consider subscribing. You can also follow me on Instagram at KenSarahDIY, where I post sneak peeks and things like that. It's actually pretty fun. So make sure that you're trying new things and have a great week. Goodbye.